He will have cashed in on over $200,000 just in the interest rate. And what is best for both the seller and the buyer to close faster.
Miranda, this one feels different. What made 27 Nani Ali'i Place the perfect candidate for seller financing?
You know, this one sat on the market for a long time, and I was honestly the third agent that had it as a listing, and it had started off listed for several $100,000 more, and we just weren't getting the offers that the seller expected. So we talked about switching the strategy, and right now is a good time to think outside the box. And sellers want what they could have gotten a year or two ago, and slashing the price and lowering it isn't always the best strategy, especially if the seller wants what they want, which is always going to be the highest. And we were just stuck in a position that there was no more room to keep slashing the price. So this was the perfect opportunity to do something different.
Okay. Most people think cash is king. So why did seller financing actually create a stronger position for your seller?
So with this particular listing, and this is one of 3 that I've done over the last few months, we might have only gotten, say, $1 million on this, and he had always hoped to get 1.3 to 1.5. And by making this a seller financing type of deal, then he is able to step in and become the bank and get the interest on the deal for as many years as we negotiate. So when this is done, when this agreement of sale or seller financing is done, he will have cashed in on over $200,000 just in the interest rate, which takes him closer to what he originally hoped to get for selling this property.
How does seller financing actually allow a seller to make more money over time compared to a traditional sale?
So this one is spread out. This particular deal was spread out for 5 years. Usually our agreement of sales are 3 to 5 years before a seller wants you to finance out of them with a bank. And by him getting the interest, he was able to pocket in the next few years over $200,000 instead of possibly, best case scenario, getting $1 million to $1.1 million for this property.
When you structure a deal like this, how much control does the seller really have over the terms?
The seller always has control over the terms, but on this one, we have even more control in the fact that we don't have to oblige the buyer's limits if they were using a traditional bank. So we don't have the same limitations or the same structured box that we have to stay in. So we can negotiate back and forth what's best for the seller and what's best for the buyer and still kind of stay in control of the deal.
Okay, let's flip it.
Okay.
What made this such an attractive opportunity for the buyer?
So I was lucky enough to be able to represent both the buyer and seller on this one. And I have been able to do that on 3 transactions over the last few months that ended up being seller financed. And it allows me to find a middle ground and what is best for both the seller and the buyer and what helps both parties reach their goals. So the buyer was looking specifically for something on Maui that could be seller financed. One, because I can negotiate a much lower interest rate. We were able to do 5% interest on this one. We were able to do it for, let's say, 5 years. And we were able to close faster on this. And she was able to come in with what she was comfortable putting down, which might have been as little as 5% or 10%. And then it fell into her wheelhouse of what she was looking for, what she could afford, and left her money to improve the property and build more on the property. So it let her spread her money out and it helped the seller get more over time.
In today's market, financing can be tough. How did this open doors that might have otherwise been closed?
So a lot of buyers that I work with or that I speak with have limitations. Just like myself, they're not paid hourly. We might be in a commission business. It could be someone who works for tips. It could be a waitress. It could be a housekeeper. It could be anyone that's not paid traditionally, or someone that may not have the traditional amount down that's needed, especially if it's an investment property, because that usually requires about 25% down depending on the type of property. So this allows my buyer who has great credit to come in and be able to negotiate the different terms. So for buyers that may not have great credit, not the traditional amount down, or can't afford the current interest rate, this opens up something that they didn't know that they could afford or that was even out there. So it really keeps us with a wider pool of buyers as soon as I can get the knowledge out there that these type of deals are available, because then the buyers say, okay, this seller isn't as strict as a bank. They're not asking for all my tax returns. What do I need as far as like a credit report? What is my credit? How much do I have to put down? They're not requiring everything that a traditional bank or lender is going to require. And so that allows someone to really get that first property and get their start, and somebody that might not traditionally be able to with our local banks or lenders.
How does removing the bank change the experience for a buyer in a deal like this?
So when you take the bank, and when I say bank, that's a general term. I'm also meaning lender or broker. It means that I can negotiate without all of the restrictions that they usually have. We can create our own rules, and think outside of the box. We can negotiate back and forth so that, you know, the seller wins on some, the buyer wins on some, and we can go in and negotiate what's best for both parties and really reach that middle ground when there are very strict standards that banks and lenders have to use. And it can be very limiting, especially for a first-time buyer or someone that might have just moved to the island from another country, or works, like I have mentioned before, for tips or commission, or doesn't show all of their income through their tax returns.
Do you think seller financing is something more sellers in Maui should be considering right now?
I think that sellers that are not getting the price that they wish they had gotten because they were late to the market, or they want what they could have gotten 2 years ago or 3 years ago at the height of the market, then this is definitely a way over a longer period to get what you were hoping to get, or something closer to it, if your circumstances allow. You know, a lot of people have their properties paid off entirely and can do this. And I think it's very important as a consideration for sellers that want something and can wait to get those returns.